Mate, we're live. I checked it. It's working. We did it.
Hey, well done.
Okay, so I'm going to do a little intro for you. So it's our first live show, and we have an amazing guest. She's an ex-lawyer who actually did some really important stuff, striving for social justice. And then later in her career, burnt out and broken, she had an epiphany that culture and leadership was instrumental in keeping an organization well. So she lobbied to create the first position in her firm that kept the environment healthy and its people thriving. I still can't believe they didn't have that, and then you just created it for yourself. Now she's the founder of Heart Leadership, consulting with other organizations and senior leaders about how to keep their companies running like a Formula One car. And yes, that was a sports reference because Gemma loves them. A big welcome to my friend, the one and only Gemma Ellison.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Thanks for having me, and particularly on the first show as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an honor to have you on. So today we're going to be talking about leadership. So we're going to talk a little bit about why it's something that needs to be focused on, why it's important, why it matters, and then we're going to have some examples of organizations that might not necessarily be doing it so well, and how that what kind of effect they get from that, and maybe an example of an organization doing it really well. So, why is leadership important?
It's important because, well, I think you see the outcome when you don't have good leadership. I think we can see that, not to sort of get controversial, but on a global scale, we've seen the need for great leadership. It's important as well because some data, 70% of people have said that their manager or their leader has a bigger impact on their mental health than anybody else in their lives. And I think that's
Wow.
absolutely mind blowing. So we know that we're in a world where we need great leaders. And we also know, though, that it's a skill set. And for me, it's a skill set that's not appreciated. I saw something yesterday which someone said becoming a leader or a manager is not a step up, it's a completely different career. And I couldn't agree more with that. So I think we know we're in a world where we need great leadership. So for me, it's the most important thing an organization can be thinking about right now.
Absolutely. So, when this goes badly, when a senior leader looks at a role and they find the person and they go, do you know what? They're really good at that role. Let's promote them into this position where that person suddenly has more responsibilities, where they'll have to look after other people and upskill them, etc. Have you got an example for us where this is festered and there's been a lot of problems as a result of bad decision making, or maybe not upskilling that person?
Yeah, definitely. I think just take it more broad in terms of even industries. I think we've got industries who promote people on their technical ability. So, for example, if it was sales, you're the best salesperson in the team. So, what will then happen is the only way up for you is to have a promotion, which means leading people. And leading people is just a completely different beast. You know, look again, if you wouldn't go into another role. So I was a lawyer, I wouldn't be allowed to be let loose in a courtroom without being trained. But actually, there was never any assessment as to my leadership ability when I was getting promoted into those roles. And I call it a deliberate leader. We should be asking people, do you want to lead people? Do you have a desire to lead people? Because it's not easy. So where I'm seeing it done badly is where there's no consideration of that, where there's only one way up in an organization, and that is, if you want to improve and get, if you want to be promoted and get pay rises and things like that, it has to be through promotion to lead people. And there's no consideration really as to whether people would A, want to do that, B, be good at doing that, and then C, there's no training for them. So I just gave you some data before about 70% of people saying that their manager has a bigger impact on their mental health than anybody else. Well,
That's
that
wild.
let's counter that with the fact that 82% of managers or leaders have never had a second's worth of training to be a leader, to give feedback, to be strategic, which again, these things are all a skill set. So where I'm seeing it done wrong is where there's no attention paid to any of that, and then no effort to upskill. And again, 82% of people have not been trained in the space, so there's a lot of catching up to do for organizations.
And how does this manifest? How does this kind of spill out?
It spells out in all sorts of different things. Attrition, people tend to leave their manager, not their organisation or their team. So you see that. You see people who are getting burnt out. Though
I've done that.
yeah, well, yeah, you've got people in your organisation who They're burning out. I feel sorry for leaders and managers. It's a lonely place. If you don't know what you're doing, you've got no one to talk to. You feel you've got to be a certain thing. So you're seeing burnout at every single level. So well-being drops completely from everybody, not just from the person who's being managed, but from the manager themselves. We're seeing lots of sort of top-down pressure on managers. We're seeing bottom-up. So we're seeing a bit of a squeeze in the middle, leaders and managers who are really struggling. So, and that's having an impact all over the place. But for me, um, developing your leaders and nurturing the right leaders is a competitive advantage. And I think that we're seeing now organisations who are doing it really well it's becoming very obvious in terms of their retention and how people feel working in the organisation.
Have you got any examples of when this is done right, and how is it done right? What is a good approach if there's an organization listening to this that goes, you know what, I'm hearing what Gemma's saying. What should I do?
Yeah, so I think there should definitely be different ways of being promoted in an organisation. So organisations I see do it well have a couple of different tracks. They'll say, for example, you can be promoted as a technical expert over here, which doesn't involve managing people, or there's a leadership route if you want to take that one as well. And what that means is they're actually looking at people's skill sets, not just assuming that because you're great in one space, you'll be great in another. They're asking them what they want and giving them ways to be promoted in those ways. And then they're investing in leadership at every single level in terms of training, whether that's peer support, mentoring, coaching, programs, anything like that. But I'm seeing the putting the people in the right places in the first place, and recruiting well, even internally. But then having things like future leaders initiatives so people can put their hand up and say, actually, I quite like the idea of leading people. That's a skill set. But we talked about sport, for example. In sports
Yeah.
teams, typically, I'm going to talk about Jurgen Klopp, Jamie, because you told me I couldn't, so I'm going to do
What?
it anyway.
You're going to talk about Jurgen Klopp?
I am, yeah.
Unbelievable.
Just, well, or maybe I'll talk about
An
Ange
exclusive.
Postecoglou for you. No, but look, when you've got a manager of a football team, for example, they are there to coach the team. That's their job. There's other bits and bobs, obviously media, all that kind of thing, but they're not on the pitch trying to score the goals. They're not selling tickets. They're not being a physio. They're not looking after the kit. Their job is to lead a team. And when I see organisations do this well, they respect the role of a manager or leader. And it's not a side of the desk job. It's an actual, this is your role. You are here to coach, manage, and lead a team. And I think we've got a lot of things that we can take from sport and bring into business because I'm convinced that if we took it seriously as a role and a position, um, the outcomes would be amazing.
Yeah, I hear that. So I've got some mates who I've spoken to in the past and talked about, okay, well, what's the next step in your career? Why aren't you pushing forward for it? And I've heard this response a few times, which is, mate, it's just dealing with too many people. I have to look after too many people. Do you know what I mean? But it's the only route for them to kind of step forward. So that I hear that idea that not everyone is not only not suited to lead people, but don't want to.
Yeah, I think that's fine. We're all good at different things, and it's a big responsibility leading people, particularly if you're doing it well. It should be we shouldn't really have blanket approaches in leadership. It should be knowing your team as individuals. But if you've got 20 people or even more in your sort of direct reporting line, that's hard. And
Yeah.
particularly in the current way we're set up, that's on the side of your desk. You've got to do everything else as well in terms of your technical role. That's what I'm talking about respecting it as a skill set and a role that it is.
What was the previous approach? Was it mainly to outsource these human-y type things to HR?
Yeah, always actually. HR. If anyone's watching this now and you're in HR, then you'll definitely know. Yeah, it's typically given to HR to try and sort all these things out. But I think it's a very personal thing within teams. It's not just a HR problem. This should be on the board notes for everyone's meetings. There should be first priority. Getting leaders, getting culture right, and how the two can interact should be a priority for any organisation. And sometimes it feels like a nice to have. But what my argument is, and we did a conference together a couple of weeks ago, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's a must have. And I think organisations who are not prioritising developing and nurturing great leaders are either not going to be surviving in 10 years' time, or they're going to be really struggling and be miles ahead of people who are doing it.
Do you think this will be commonplace in 10 years' time?
Yes, I think it has to be. I think, I mean, I'm also an optimist. So I think it has to get better because people are voting with their feet. We're seeing a record number of people leaving organisations without a job to go to. That's unheard of. Like, I mean, that's just something that didn't used to happen. But people now are saying, I'm not going to do it anymore. So I think investment in compassionate leaders who want to lead and can lead people, I think that's all we'll see in 10 years' time. I think there's definitely a changing of the guard happening.
That's positive. And what is it, Gemma Ellison, that you do to promote this particular subject?
Lots of things really, but one of the initiatives that we've got at the moment is something called Leadership Labs, because we're really mindful that people are time poor and attention poor as well. And you might be thinking, do you know what? I want to do leadership development, but actually I can't be getting people out of the office for 2 days a week, or to look at PowerPoints. But for me, that's not where the magic is. The magic's in conversation and coaching. So we run something called Leadership Labs. Me and my colleague Lisa, who I'm sure you'll hear from on this series at some point.
100%, she'll be on it.
So we run something called Leadership Labs, where we bring a group of leaders together, either from separate organisations or from the same organisation, for 2.5 hours a month for a really sort of powerful coaching, I guess, experience where they challenge each other, we challenge them. They can come together and take off their masks and actually, be who they are. And it's lonely as a leader, as I said before, but also we give them things to experiment on. So when they've got challenges in their organisation, they'll go off and run some experiments on how to change things from a culture perspective. So we do the opposite of what everyone says. So everyone says, think big, blue sky thinking. We don't say that. We say think small and act small. And through those small actions every day, what you're doing is building a great culture. So that's something that we offer both open and in-house. And it's the feedback we're getting from the leaders is great. And we can see it, to be honest, as we're going through the program with them. So that's what we keep ourselves busy with at the moment.
Amazing. And then if someone's listening to this and they want to find out more about it, how would they go about doing that?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you could connect us, Jamie, or Lisa Lloyd.
Yeah.
Speak to us on LinkedIn. There's a website, it's Time for Change, and you can link yourself to Leadership Labs on there. But this is for people who want to do things a little bit differently, who want to sort of think, okay, how can we develop our leaders or our culture in a completely different way? Because it's not the traditional way of doing things. But what we're seeing is it's making a massive impact.
Excellent. Amazing. Gemma, it's been amazing to have you on as my first guest. I can't believe that we've stayed within the 15 minutes and we've talked so much about this subject, which is kind of what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to pack a lot of information into a small amount of time so people can shoot off and have their lunch now. Again, amazing to have you on, and hopefully we get you back on at some point.
Thanks, Jamie. Take care.
Cheers, Gemma. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.